Myself for questions for 5 minutes. Mr. Neumann, your report found that federal funding for low-dose radiation research in the U.S. had declined by almost 50% from 2012 to 2016. Now, some of the other testimony was about we had to depend on foreign research, as you heard, from, I think, from Dr. Woloschak, or was it Dr. Brink? What impact has that decrease in funding, in your opinion, had on the U.S. leadership in this area of research?
Well, certainly when talking to all the agencies that are involved in this type of research, they all agreed that there is a need to coordinate and better collaborate to identify and develop the research priorities to see that they're met. And so without this leadership, there's a potential of some of these gaps not being filled.
Let me follow up on that. A couple of the testimonies said that there was no collaborative mechanism. And so, Dr. Woloschak, I'll jump over to you real quick. What does a collaborative mechanism to you look like?
So in the days of the DOE low-dose program, what they would do is, if there was an interest from, say, DOE and NASA, NASA would help fund the same project. They would give a bit of the funding and expect that they could take advantage of the data that resulted from it. That, I think, was a very good collaborative arrangement between two different agencies working together that had similar goals. That's no longer possible. NASA's working alone. They don't have that sort of collaborative arrangement. I think similar arrangements between NIH and DOE actually existed for a period of time, too. So I think those are the kinds of things that are very, very helpful.
Do you agree with that, Dr. Brink?
I do indeed.
Okay, now Dr. Woloschak makes a very interesting point in her testimony that we don't have the next generation, for whatever the term is, of scientists. We're not getting them trained since you have a college nexus there. Why is that, do you think?
You know, it's an interesting question. We have noticed that there's been a relative decline in what we call radiation professionals over the years, and it's certainly been a concern of the National Council for Radiation Protection and others. And it's not exactly obvious why there has been a decline, but we've certainly made efforts to try and re-bolster and reinvigorate interest in this field, really for the sake of the nation going forward.
Are you in possession of the numbers? Do you know what that looks like? Did we have 1,000 scientists that have now gone down to 100 or 50, or do you know what the...
I don't, but we'd be happy to find some numbers for you and get those to you.
Well, I'm just curious because that's interesting why we're declining, and to your comments that we had to depend on foreign countries whose interests may not exactly align with ours.
Yeah, I can comment on that as well. I mean, I know American Society for Therapeutic Radiation Oncology did a joint meeting at NIH about 2 or 3 years ago to try to talk about the decline. And I believe what the major result of that meeting was to say it's declining because we don't have people funded in low-dose radiation research. So then to take students into the lab to do research and learn how to understand low doses, there were no training grounds.
So let me paraphrase that if I understand. If we were to take and we were to have a more better funded program, a more collaborative approach where we've focused on this, then we could perhaps induce students to be interested. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. I see it with my own students, actually.
Okay, I'm going to change gears a little bit. You said in your testimony that there's a lot of naturally occurring low-dose radiation. You went through some examples. Do we have any facts and figures? This may be for the both of you doctors. Do we have any facts and figures on what percentage of that occurs due to medical exams? I mean, is it 5% in the general population? Is it 3%? What percentage actually occurs due to medical exams?
We actually wouldn't call medical exams part of natural background. So,
well, I don't mean natural, but natural was one. You know, you go through airports, you go through screening.
So medical exposures make up the highest percentage of human-made exposures that we have in the U.S.
What
today.
percentage is that?
I think it's about 45%.
45%, okay. And it's even in the water you drink. Before you take another drink, I wanted to be sure you remember that. Okay, another question. Dr. Woloschak, in your testimony, you said you had considered that there were also risks to the unborn. Is that through the mother, or is it through the medical exams? Is that how do you consider that?
Actually, the data out of the EU right now is suggesting that there are effects during pregnancy that are probably coming through the mother in some way, and we don't actually know the low dose mechanisms, but it looks as though the unborn may be more sensitive. And even the data coming out of Hiroshima and Nagasaki RERF studies suggest that the very young are more susceptible to cancer induction than very old from cleanup sites, from those sorts of things.
All right, well, thank you for that reminder. Two quick questions. I'm a little over my time. Nagasaki, Hiroshima, and that Japanese-related event, that population has to be going away because those survivors have to be diminishing almost daily. Do you know how many of those are left?
I don't know the exact numbers, but you are exactly right. They are declining significantly. I was just there maybe 6 months or 8 months ago, and they're continuing to study the population as long as they can. But one thing to realize is most of that population got sort of higher dose, what we would consider to be low, moderate dose, not the very low doses that we would get say, from occupational exposures
All
here.
right. And then finally, I think it was you, Dr. Brink, who talked about Chernobyl. Do I remember right?
Yes.
And so let's jump over to that population. When was that event, and how many were affected? Do you know that offhand?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
So it's a more recent study.
The event was about 30 years ago. The problem with the Chernobyl studies is that the dosimetry is a little bit off. There's a lot of work being done with the dosimetry,
Right.
but it's hard to analyze easily.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm over my time, so I appreciate y'all, and I now represent.